I think we're ready. Okay, thanks for coming to this session, which we've titled Reduce Tech Rage by Picking the Right Tools, the Future of Plant Records. So I'm Havard from Botanical Software, and together with me, we have Waheed, or Dr. Waheed,
yes,
I should say.
Yeah, lovely to be here. And yeah, it's my first APGA conference this year. So yes, I've enjoyed it very much so this week. Really lovely to meet you all. My background's in plant taxonomy from research, and I've been working on this project for a couple of years after finishing my PhD with Kew Gardens. So yeah, it's very exciting to be working with it.
Yeah, thank you. Some of you probably know me. So this is our 10th year at the APGA conference as Botanical Software, and we originally worked with on the RSPG collaboration. So we separated or went out of that collaboration in 2019. We still support our mobile solutions that we developed, which we then renamed to Floria. And then we started on Hortis, which we started a couple of years ago now, I think. And so we're going to talk a bit about the motivation behind that, and also, well, why in terms of anger management. So before we start, just to do the housekeeping, if you can log into menti.com. I don't know if hopefully the QR code can work from that distance. I hope so. That's great. So the nice thing now, you will actually see the slides as we talk as well. Not the demo, but and then we're going to do a few sort of interactive word clouds with you through the morning. No. Through this session, I mean, and yeah. So if everybody, I would just wait to make sure everybody is sort of up and running. So yeah, you should just see the first slide. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the slide.
And then eventually we'll get into questions later on. So as some of you joined our session yesterday, was the word cloud thing was a bit more complex, and I will have a different solution to that. So hopefully it goes a bit more smoother. Okay, so now anger management. I have had that many times in my life, and I'm sure you as well, probably. If you haven't, then you're quite a unique individual. So how does technology make you feel? And in general, we could talk about plant records, but in general, it should make you feel sort of confident and happy, but often it does actually scale over to the opposite side, and that's very much like a daily sort of grind for many. So we as a company, or what we do is we really want to help you to end up in that corner as much as possible, and that's particularly very important for, I think, things like plant records, where you have so much else to do in the garden. I don't think there's any people in a botanic garden who feel like they have too much time. So, and there's like the hierarchy of needs. The plants are sort of always top on the list, and for some gardens, especially smaller gardens, plant records are sort of a little bit lower down on the food chain, if you like. And of course, if you have technology that really doesn't seem to work with you, then it becomes even more attractive to sort of invest in plant records or invest in that effort. And that's the key, I think, for any garden to be able to get a good records. It has to be effective, cost effective, basically. You could probably put a sort of money on it. How much does it take to record? How much effort do you need to put into it, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of our sort of big motivations here, to build tools that keep that threshold so low that you can participate in a broader audience, and also we see very often that you have users who are more occasional users. You might not use the software very often, and then the threshold, if it's difficult to get started, then we go into the nervous and angry sort of mode. So we want to end up on that scale, and if we don't, then we want to hear why, or get feedback on that, obviously. So we're going to start off with one kind of therapy session here, where we can ask you guys to say, to express of the top 3 things you struggle with today. Now, in the context of plant records, please. not. This is beyond our payroll to give sort of psychotherapy on things beyond plant records. But so if you could please, I think we've given up to 5 things.
Yeah. So it shouldn't appear on your mobiles.
And as you sort of send your suggestions in here, they should pop up on the screen here. So we can start. Yeah, here's a couple. Time. Great. Access, yeah. That's a good one. Trading new users. Lost. I suppose it's loss of data. Or yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. This is time, I think, is very, we've done a similar survey before, and I think time is a very, very classic answer.
Taxable, that's an interesting one.
Yeah. Great. Okay. I don't know, we should ask time-wise. Yeah, we have time to, if anybody wants to elaborate on one of these. I don't know, do you have anybody want to volunteer some comments?
We're small enough that we don't have a designated staff member to take care of plant records, and as a university that I rely on student support basically.
Yeah.
And that estimate says it rotates often, and so I need something that's easy enough to use that they can train them that you can go on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so no dedicated plant records person. I think I wonder about the numbers there, kind of the stats. I think that's very high. I think it's more like a luxury for the gardens with more resources, and I think that's what we want to be able to facilitate, that you don't need that if you don't have it. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Any so rotating stuff? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's data errors, loss of data. That's also, that's the worst thing, really. Or maybe. I mean, it's really, really dreadful when you made the effort and then data disappears. Then, of course, the scale of anger and frustration is really hitting the max, I would say. Okay, thank you. That's really, really helpful. And that really feeds back to this story as well, when you mentioned sort of a lack of staff and particularly plant records people. So in a global context, we know that based on the survey that was carried out by Botanic Gardens Australia and New Zealand, and similar surveys through Botanic BGCI, that less than 10% of the gardens in the world have a professional system. And that's quite a dramatic situation, really, if you think about it. And what we've seen is that the reason behind this is a couple of things. It's the cost. They can't basically afford the systems that are available. It's also the complexity of the systems. They don't have the resources to install and manage it. It's expensive, but also to train, etc., etc. So that's one of the motivations behind developing a consumer grade product, let's call it that. And we see here, we actually won there was a tender process with the Botanic Gardens Australia and New Zealand, and they picked us as our preferred record system based on our sort of having a design-driven development style, which hopefully comes through today when we look through some of the things when we run a demo, etc. So arguably, good plant records are not very common, basically. People have spreadsheets, people have paper, and all kinds of things. And of course, if you don't have the definition of a botanic garden, stipulate that you have a well-documented collection. So you're slowly become just a garden if you don't have plant records. And this is another thing we want to help with here as well, is to allow, especially there where you have even more interesting biodiversity, you might say, you might have less resources to actually invest in these kind of tools. So we're looking at some sort of pricing model that adapts to local economy as well, so we can get those regions on board as well. So this is a really interesting map, and you see the cluster of gardens in the regions where, well, in Western world, you might say. So, yeah. So Waheed, take over.
Yeah, so it's very interesting in the context of how record systems have evolved and adapted over time, and how sort of, you can see from this phylogeny, because I'm a very interested taxonomist, I sort of looked at it in this way, in that, gardens may have originally started with things like handwritten notes and index cards, and how those have slowly evolved into, basic spreadsheets and, simple databases, as Havard was just mentioning, with BGCI data as well. And how over time, if the garden has the kind of capacity to, train up members of staff and, have dedicated record systems. And today, with integrated other complex kind of solutions that include mapping as well, kind of how those have evolved over time from kind of written note-based approaches to desktop-based approaches. And today, the main part for a lot of kind of technology is that it's based on the cloud. And that, in terms of number of opportunities, is just incredible. Not only from like a collaboration perspective, but data sharing, material sharing. I remember about 10 years ago when I first started at Kew, I helped them database a carpological collection that was related to the herbarium material. And even back then, they sort of had drawers and drawers of material that was completely isolated from the rest of their collections. And 10 years later, they're still using it, and it's gaining so much more information from these otherwise disparate collections. And we see that a lot in botanic gardens, not only in herbaria, but living collections and elsewhere. So this is a really fantastic opportunity in the 21st century, where technology and all the other industries are heading this way. And that's kind of partly our our process of understanding why gardens are struggling in this particular area. And as Havard mentioned, one of the primary causes is the complexity of record systems. So we heard from yourself there that having the inability to train people, or not everybody feels comfortable using existing products that might be out there. So that's a big barrier for entry into this kind of very important sphere. The other thing is the high cost of ownership. So technology, certainly on the cloud with subscription-based approaches, is heavily reducing the cost of owning software. You don't have the maintenance fees, the security aspects that you would otherwise have with desktop-based products. So high cost of ownership is a very big issue for gardens, especially in those that are in lower economy regions around the world, who are doing just as much and just as important work as any other garden in the world, at least in my opinion. The other thing that we've talked about is a lack of integration, a lack of collaboration. So, my personal example, and also, gardens around the world in terms of material sharing, knowledge sharing, there's a lot of duplicated efforts. All gardens are doing the same thing, but if there was more collaboration and more integration of shared kind of resources, in the 21st century, there's so much opportunity there. The other thing is, we've heard from the word cloud already that time and staff are two big kind of causes for plant records to fall by the wayside, and being able to utilize your garden staff and the resources that you have is a huge pain point for gardens. The last thing is the ability for gardens to use plant records more than records, basically. So how can gardens get the most out of their data? You know, how can they be used to, you know, apply for grants, you know, leverage that data into more strategic tools, communicating that with stakeholders, communicating with that with staff, with visitors. You know, there's so much more to plant records than a spreadsheet, basically. So that's certainly a huge opportunity, and also one of the main drivers for us to explore collection value scoring, which, if you had a chance to see that yesterday, we touched on some of those aspects there. So, as I mentioned, yeah, these are kind of the main drivers among many others for us to start, you know, exploring this with our new project, which launched last year. So we've been building this global infrastructure over the last couple of years, and we launched this last December. As Havard mentioned, we've been working very closely with gardens in Australia and New Zealand, being their preferred supplier. So we have about 15 to 20 clients there, also in Europe and the US. So it's a great time for the future of plant records. And Havard's going to touch on some of the kind of big areas that we're exploring.
Yep. We've obviously, some of you may have followed some of our webinar series where we constantly try to figure out what people struggle with, and the key here, I suppose, is to we've been looking at this problem from taking one step back and see how we can solve those problems that gardens are struggling with, and these are sort of some of the fundamentals. One is to be able to access your plant records wherever you are on whatever you have. So you can, if you have a mobile phone, you can do that. If you have a tablet, whatever you have, and that you don't need to install it. So, and the way we work is that we design everything we do to make sure it works on the smartphone first, and then we sort of design it then for the other platforms. And it's non-trivial to make things look easy and what shall I say, user-friendly on the mobile. It's a very compact real estate, but hopefully you'll see through that having a designer on board, we hope that we can manage to achieve that. The other thing, when you have a cloud-based platform, it opens up a lot of opportunities in terms of collaboration and data sharing, because the data is always there, available. Obviously, we have to take security into take that very seriously, which we do, but that helps an awful lot. And the other part of that, as it's on the, we're not going to talk much about some people might wonder, what is cloud? But the key point here is that it's like a super resilient sort of system that will just keep on going. It's made with a lot of technology for fault tolerance, etc. So your data will always be available, regardless of what's happening in that kind of mystical place, which is called the cloud. And that has many benefits in terms of you don't have to worry about it. There's some, if you want to know more, there's on our website on hortis.com, there's a bit of a page about the technical aspect. If you have some IT people who wonder how we do this, so you can get some details about security and backup features, etc. So with this platform, then you don't need to install anything. And this is I suppose some of you may have through COVID experienced how difficult it is to do work suddenly when you suddenly go home and you're going to start using the products that you had in the office. With Hortis, there's nothing to worry about. You just bring up a browser and you log in and off you go. And of course, the last thing here is we have the slogan called light yet powerful. So we know that there are complex scenarios here in this field. There are, and we can't avoid that. But allowing people to get to get their job done, and then when there are more complex things needed, still manage to find your way through that without having to become angry. So these are the kind of fundamentals about how we think about Hortis. So by sort of making this available where you are when it happens, arguably you will be able to, or at least with more ease, allowing you to have data that is more up to date. And the whole thing is here, if your data is not up to date, how can you make decisions based on the data? It becomes the more behind you are, the less useful the records become. And then of course the second part is accuracy. And again, if you have the data available, it's like a feedback loop. If everybody has access to it, people will start questioning things. Oh, this is not right, etc., etc. So you get this sort of symbiotic thing where your data is sort of part of your daily life, and it, yeah, it's like, I don't know, I don't have any good analogies, but it makes a huge impact. And then finally, if you get those two things right, you can then start to leverage your data in more ways than you did before, because it's reliable. So these are kind of getting the cost down, you might say, in terms of how much effort you need to do to capture this information. And then you can also then start utilizing it, and then it becomes even more valuable. So it's a very interesting dynamic here. So we look forward to seeing how this evolves as we enhance the product. But we already see signs of at least those two first here already. So we have a sort of a term here of thinking that we get accuracy and we allow for collaboration, and then we can then bring in more analytics so that you can get this sort of strategic tool. And as Waheed mentioned yesterday, that recording, if you didn't watch that seminar or this presentation yesterday about collection value scoring, that you can have a look at. And the other thing worth mentioning down here on the right is because I don't know if some of you may use other cloud tools, and the nice other benefit of cloud products is that it opens up for more easy integration with other tools again. So we can then allow Hortis to be very focused as a plant record system, but then we can integrate with other things. So we don't have to create a bloated product. One example is, for example, tree assessment. There are many different standards about that globally. And if we were to sort of put that in here, it would, it might be a bit of a complex thing to deal with. But now if we can integrate with that, then it's like those who need very advanced features like that, we can integrate. And then, yeah, so this is going to be quite a big thing, I think, in the next few years. Label printing, I don't know. There's so many different opportunities around this. And I wanted to mention a few things about how we work, because arguably we call it design-driven development. Historically, often you have a more like an engineer-driven development that results in what shall I say, products that are more reflective of the technology than the actual user. So what we do is we do what is called the discovery process with our designer. We do interviews with clients and really work really closely with the community. And then we go through the design phase and the development, testing, and then deploy. And the last thing is very, very, what shall I say, exciting for us. So our engineers can deploy a new version of Hortis in less than 5 minutes. And it's all globally, everybody has the same, it's updated. And we could do that several times a day. So that creates a whole different type of dynamic for how we can respond to the community and how we can release new updates, etc. So this cycle is sort of continuous. We just keep on developing and improving. And for those of you, if you go to Hortis, you can look at the release notes on the support platform to get a sense of the cycles of things coming out, and we have good feedback from that. And the nice thing is, again, you don't need to worry about installing or anything. You just have the latest. So that's really, really fantastic. I don't want to. Would you like to add something to this, Waheed? Ready for some demos, I think.
So we're going to do just a very brief demonstration just to show you some of the concepts that we've already been exploring, and hopefully a bit of luck. So because it's web-based, it's what's known as a progressive web app, which is a bit technical, but what that means is that it is run on the web. So any device that has a browser, be it a phone, an iPad, any platform that has a browser, it will work there. But you also have the option to download that as an app. So it will look and feel very much like an app. So there are a couple of options for doing that, but I'm going to show you in a browser today. So each garden has its own, personal URL where their database is stored. So, your garden typically will have its name here. So I'm just going to dip into a garden who we've been working very closely with from Amsterdam. De Hortis, Hortis.com is the full domain. And you can see here when you sign in, you have a couple of options. Because it's cloud-based, it's signed me in automatically. Let me just show you that again. Because it's cloud-based, we can integrate with other providers. So, Google, a lot of institutions have Google accounts, or Office 365 is another example. So there's authentication options through that as well. And an alternative is, of course, to create a separate account in Hortis.
Just to add to that, the amount of effort to get just to get approval from Google and Microsoft to get that type of integration is non-trivial, but the security aspect here is, of course, extremely important. And yeah, Hortis as we put a lot of effort into that, obviously, and that not one less password to remember. That's also a good thing from an Angular perspective, I think.
Yeah, you can, and very easily you can see when you logged in, you'll have to ignore the verify your account notification because it's on a test account here. But you can very quickly see a snapshot of your collection, the number of accessions and plant materials and taxa, but also a snapshot of the provenance of those accessions. Are they wild, derived, are they garden origin, etc. And on the left, you've got quick access to different dimensions of your collection. So we like to think that plant records have 4 dimensions. So you've got the list kind of view of your plant records, a map view, like a spatial dimension, and then a visual dimension as well. So images being a classic example, images are so important to plant records. But the 4th dimension, which isn't quite clear just yet, but it's happening under the hood, and that's a temporal dimension, so a concept of time. And in Hortis, because we have what's called a full audit log, which Havard will talk about later, each record and each change gets stored as a new version of that record. So we can go, you can go back in time to look how your individual record or your entire collection has changed over time. And Havard's going to talk a bit more about that later on. So I'll just very quickly show you just a brief example of how it looks. So under plant materials, you have your typical fields that you might expect, accession number, scientific name. Here we have the type of plant material. You have whether it's a plant or seed, the provenance, status, things like this, as well as the location, quantity of that material. And you can go into that individual record, add notes, curate that information, simply make some edits, which, is very simple process-wise. And, every time, each field is changed, that is getting logged as a new change. And all of these will get reflected in the system because it's associated with each account. It will know that Waheed has logged in he's changed the quantity from 5 to 10 or whatever. So there's a lot of kind of power in such a system. And it's a term known in the medical industry as longitudinality, which basically means tracking the same subjects over time. And you can see how that type of approach works with plant records. So you've got the same plant records that you're tracking over time. We have photo capabilities, as I mentioned, so simple uploading, and if you're on a mobile device, that will open up your camera roll, and you can choose from your mobile phone gallery as well. The other thing worth mentioning here is this share element. So because it's cloud-based and web-based, we talked about the sharing and collaboration elements. So when I press this share button, I'm actually copying the URL, and then I could send that to anybody who has been granted access to this particular collection. So, you could share that with a colleague, go out in the garden, have a look at it. There's a plethora of opportunities there.
Yeah, from a share perspective, I suppose some of you use Google Docs or Office 365, and this idea of working together on the document, etc. So this will also evolve into share, where you can share to people outside your institution. We don't do that yet, but that is also, if you have somebody who's an expert on in this case, this species I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. That sort of ability is really, I think makes life much more interesting.
The other exciting thing is, of course, the mapping, and we're actually using OpenStreetMap as our base map layer. This is an open source platform, so individual gardens can look at their map and add paths, etc. But we also support more kind of GIS type approaches as well. So there's a lot of opportunities here when it comes to mapping. And the good thing about this type of approach is that it's all extremely smooth. So you can sort of get a sense of how smooth that is. And from a usability perspective, hovering on individual pins, clicking on those pins to view those records, it's all very user-friendly, as we were talking about earlier. That barrier to entry is very low. And a good example of where we've focused our efforts on map first is just simple activities like updating the positions. So this rhodocoma, for example, if I wanted to change the position of that, I can hit update, and I can move that to the middle of the path if I wanted to. And when I confirm that, it gets logged in the system as me having changed that. The latitude and longitude have updated, and this is automatically reflected on anybody else using it. So if they're in the field on their mobile phones, they'll see this rhodocoma has moved. So it's very unique in terms of its responsiveness as well.
Just to add, this is something that I'm very excited about. It's a bit techy, but we're running in a browser, and it's actually much more sort of dynamic than you would be able to do just like 3 or 4 years ago. 2.5D is something we also look at maybe a bit later, where you can put your epifites on top of other things. And of course, you have the satellite as well to show. So this will obviously change over time more and more. But the idea of being able to spend your whole day in the map, you can do that here. You can actually do all your add new records, make changes, etc.
And the other thing about spending your whole day in the map is also through the search functionality. So you might want to look at, where are all my Quercus records? And when you search, oh no, I've sort of misspelt it intentionally here with a K and a V, but we're still returning all of the Quercus records, and that's because we use a similarity search algorithm that picks up things like you might have a spelling mistake, or, you know, not everybody's comfortable with scientific names. So there's a lot of, going back to that user-friendly usability question there as well.
We have yet to add the did you mean purpose, but hopefully one day. but it is very, it is links to that whole anger thing again. If you just make one little subtle mistake and you don't find anything, that won't happen here. Want to add one thing as well. We had some feedback where we now, if you have spelled it correct, we will give only the exact matches. So it's actually doing what should I say, both country and Western in terms of features. So
yeah, I think that's the other thing that's worth mentioning. I mean, we could talk about this for longer, but just conscious of time because we have a few other bits to talk about. Is the ability to, you know, add new material. So this is a list of all of the unmapped plant material, and adding this to your map again is very easy. Here, you know, this is all the unmapped material. So I'm just going to add the position of this Coletia paradoxa. You know, now if I wanted to hit the bullseye here, you know, when I confirm that change, it's logged the latitude and longitude for that record, and you know, away you go.
Maybe you could also show the mobile and tablet description.
Yeah. So the other thing that's worth mentioning, I'll show the list for you because it's quite interesting here, how we approach user design as well. So here we're actually showing the same information, it's just displayed slightly differently. And this is where Dave, our designer, comes in, because, you know, with a small real estate on a mobile phone, you're very limited with what you can display and how you can display it. But essentially, you know, you've got the same information as you saw on desktop, and similarly on an iPad as well. You see a slightly different layout of the same information. Okay, we will. Does anyone have any questions? Just on that very brief overview.
So you moved it around on the map, but I'm assuming is if you just entered the latitude in that thing, you would see that automatically appear on that. Vice versa.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. So just to add, and just to verify, if you're in the field of a tablet up to a GPS receiver and you pick up that coordinate, it's going to go ahead and drop it at that spot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We will head back over here.
And for those who want to try out Hortis, obviously get in touch. But we hope to, in the next few months, get more of an option for people to just do that online and automatically onboard it or try it out directly. But for now, if you want to try it out, then get in touch. We're just going to talk a bit more about how our sort of philosophy or vision in terms of the things that we've analyzed on our research and looking at the fundamental problems that people are struggling with. We're going to talk in a bit more detail about a few of these things. Shared taxonomy. This is something we know a lot of institutions find very difficult to relate to, especially institutions with few resources. So that's something we're going to talk a bit more about. I'm not going to cover many of these things. The one on the bottom here, I think, is very interesting as well. To allow people, we have this idea about being very permissive in terms of data entry. If you're out in the field and you have some information that you feel should be captured, it shouldn't prevent you from doing that. And if it's not properly complete, then having a draft approval workflow can allow you to do work half finished, and then somebody else can deal with that. We're going to talk a bit about that. Data sharing and shared vocabularies. We worked quite a lot on that already, looking at how sort of factual information can be more collaboratively captured, like life form characteristics, for example. Is it a tree? Most people will agree that certain plant species are a tree, but certain times they're, anyway, this is a long story. We have some interesting documents. If you want to have any access to some of those research papers we started on some of these things, then get in touch. We mentioned integration. We're not going to talk more about that today. And of course, we had the story about collection value scoring, which is the idea there, just to say a few words. We have a separate slide on that as well. So I'll talk about that a bit more in that slide. Now, and that's the slide. So the idea about collection value scoring is to allow you to express the value of your plants in relation to your mission. So you look at a plant and you think, how important is that to you? Now, this is can be very helpful, not only to put some sort of metrics on what you have in your collection, but over time you can see the trends in relation to how you put your efforts in, and if your collection is actually moving in the right direction in relation to your mission. It's also helpful in terms of Hort staff. They see a plant and then they can be warned that this is a critically endangered or a very high value individual that you need to really look after, even though it looks very poorly, versus a very low value plant that you think then you could just pull it out and put it in the compost heap. So those kind of things are extremely useful, so that we end up with a system that helps you to make decisions based on data and not just by hunch and instinct. So that's one of those aspects we talked about earlier, getting more out of the effort of putting in the data in the first place. The other thing that Waheed mentioned as well is this idea about immutability is one term, audit trail. So we keep a revision of your plant records. Over time, you will have a time machine. And this is really useful also. Actually, it's an imperative in terms of the value scoring model, because you will then be able to see how your collection have changed over time and use that as a way of negotiating and pay rise, maybe, I don't know. There are many. And this, one thing we have, for example, is what we call soft delete. Again, back to anger. When you delete something, it will just be hidden and you can retrieve it back if you made a mistake. And then draft approval thing, we will talk about a bit more in a separate slide. But this is really something that is more achievable on the cloud, because although the data here will be quite big after a while, it's peanuts in terms of the capacity that's out there. So you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, so it's another sort of way where platform or technology will actually solve problems that people are struggling with. I know the one who mentioned loss of data. That's the beauty here. And with an audit trail as well, the nervousness of making a change is sort of eliminated here, because everybody could see what's happened and you can actually see and revert back to what was previously done. So it becomes much more of a, I don't know, happy place. Okay. So the idea about the draft approval is that we can do that in so many different settings where people you can then start to sort of include much more people, of course, in the data capture in its first place. I remember having discussions with one at Amsterdam. He does some training of students on plant identification, and then bringing all those students into the garden and to go around and make some, just like a sort of educational aspect of seeing if they can actually make, or they can sort of come up with an opinion that might differ from what is in the garden. And then those can be then submitted as drafts for re-identification. And then the curator can look at that and maybe that some of these things are right. So there's a lot of opportunities here in terms of how you can change your working patterns. We have in Hortis also changed the whole way we think about costs and licensing as well, in that we have a sort of pricing model where you based on consumption. So you basically have capacity. So you can have 100 people working one day and then nobody for 3 weeks, for example. So it's extremely flexible and fair in terms of costs. And price-wise as well, data consumption is free. So that doesn't have any impact on your bill. So you get that kind of the dynamic of allowing people to participate and use the data and capture data. So we have another word cloud coming up. Who do you think, if taking the fact that you could have this capability of allowing people to participate, can you come up with some ideas in your garden that you think you might want to sort of be included in the record keeping workflow? And when it comes to draft approval, there's also draft decline, or what do you call it?
Rejection.
Yeah, draft rejection is another pattern that we will support, of course. I think we're given 5 options. I love that one, yeah, citizen scientists. Welcome to my garden. We allow every visitor to participate. That'd be cool. I mean, it's theoretically possible to allow photos to come in as drafts from all the people who come into the garden. Why not? Cool. Volunteers, yep. And the volunteer aspect was one of the, we spent quite a lot of energy trying to figure out, and that's again, technology actually solving some problems. When you have a cloud platform, you can sort of be more creative in terms of how you do software licensing as well. So having a sort of subscription-based thing where we now, because we have all the data of who's doing what and so forth, we can then be much more flexible and fair in terms of the pricing. So small gardens can really get something very powerful for a very low fee. Gardeners, that's a very common thing, allowing horticulturalists, they typically are on the front line of where it happens, where the plants are moved and so forth. And then this is all about accuracy as well. If a horticulturalist have to tell somebody else, the sort of the translation there might sometimes, things get distorted. Where did you put it? Or was it that plant? All those kind of things. And the amount of time that's spent there as well. There's the famous forgetting curve, how when you learn something or you observe something, and the accuracy of your observations just slowly drops. And then if you tell somebody else, etc. So this is very important. But this is really great. Thank you. Head gardener staff, interns, curators, technicians, etc. Botanists.
Herbarium staff is an interesting one, because I mean that's a good example of a disparate system or disparate groups of people in like siloed departments, and although you'd expect plant records to be focused on living collections, there's no reason for other voucher collections to be cross-pollinating. As it were. So yeah, that's a very good example of who you might want to involve in this work.
Yeah. Cool. There is an opportunity here as well to have some sort of collaboration with other gardens. You could, there are scientific or specialists within certain genera. You can send, can you go through all our whatever, and then just send them a link, and then they can go through it and do re-identifications based on photographs, for example. Those kind of things could be tremendously helpful for quality growth and cost of, etc. So lots of opportunities. Thank you. Okay, so just going to talk a bit about shared taxonomy. So because again, the benefit of cloud, this was something I know, working on this problem for 15 years, that this is going to be, everybody has different opinions, etc., etc. Well, that's maybe, so the way we approach this is, first of all, we're planning to integrate with the World Checklist of Vascular Plants. We might, World Flora Online, they're both amazing resources now. And a lot of things have happened in the last 5-10 years on the quality and the scope of these two data sets. So the World Checklist covers 86% of all known species, which is considerable. Getting that integrated will help an awful lot. And of course, if you then share your data with BGCI, which you should, then you will obviously, your quality will be much higher when you have that. Think of it as more like a spell check, if you like. The other thing is here, of course, it has all the published names integrated as well. So you get really sort of top spell checking capabilities that way. I'm not sure if there's more to say about that. The way we approach it, I'm not going to talk much more about technical details here, but the way we approach it is that you can still have your own opinion. So this is more like an opinion on what is the current taxonomy, and then you could still decide what you want to print on your labels and etc. So we're sort of, it's shared. The key point is that you have then a name that is used by others, so data sharing becomes possible, which is a big thing, I think. And then we go back to the other aspects around taxonomy, which is sort of collaborating on factual information like life form characteristics, for example. Everybody's now today arguably sitting there managing that on their own in their own garden, which is not very useful from a resource perspective. Going back to the whole idea about stress. So World Checklist, they come with a new update every 3 months typically. And that level of stress, I think quite a few gardens have. What do we have on our labels? Oh, it's not the current taxonomy. And then of course, so when we would push a new update here, we will, because when you print labels, we will track what you printed. So you don't need to worry about it. You can just take an action when you need to. So you then are basically subscribing to opinions, and you can relax and have a cup of tea and think, I'll do it tomorrow. So that's quite a big thing. And of course, the changes that happens are sometimes quite significant. So you don't have to be stressed about that, which you might be today. I don't know. Okay. And this thing we put in this slide because I think it's quite interesting. There was a survey done about medical profession in the medical profession about the most sort of impactful medical innovation in the last 100 years, and penicillin or whatever. What is it? And the answer was the internet, which when you think about it, is actually quite interesting. How you almost could argue that the human species have evolved quite dramatically because of internet. Some things are not necessarily that great as a consequence of that, but arguably it has, the net effect is arguably positive, I would say. And I think here again we come into that idea about having opportunities to share knowledge a bit with others, and the internet brings that with us. So that's really exciting. And there's another theory here, which is somebody coined it the fourth industrial revolution. I'm not sure the word revolution is very sort of inspire sort of optimism, but hopefully in this context it does. In the way we had the steam engine, we had the introduction of electronics, and then the computer really changed again how we as species could sort of participate and collaborate. And then now, I think this phrase was coined only like 5-6 years ago, with the convergence, with artificial intelligence, with cloud, the ability to sort of move, to improve, you might say, it has increased dramatically. And that's why we think Hortis also can sort of take part in that aspect and provide that opportunity for the community with collaboration, and then be sort of the sort of engine for change for the better. I don't think we have more slides, but we have time for some questions. We have 5 minutes left of the session. So any questions from anybody? Okay, that's okay.
So for the mapping of new locations, are you in any way tapping into GPS receivers or any high precision devices to be able to map those locations?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'll repeat that. So use of high precision equipment. So we've explored that with our current app as well, and the way that works reasonably well to use to basically use high precision with Bluetooth capabilities. So you allow your smartphone to use that as the main source for GPS signals. The one aspect, just of geeking out a bit here, is that some GPS receivers that are high precision have a lot of post-processing capabilities. So this would need to be a GPS receiver with high precision real-time accuracy. So yeah, Greg has good experience there.
I use the Florida app, offline data, but it's in the symbol RQVC, and our state through the Department of Transportation has a web address you can route to, but after those live real-time directions over the state signals, they have like stations that have a direction for the direction. And I get 7 centimeters accuracy in the field lab. So if you can find that, then be a pretty answer. It's not that. So if I'm under canopy during summer, of course you can do that. Winter. So yeah, it's like live. I'm right there. So I'm right here. So you pick the position and I got forward or something. So,
when you look at sort of the map we saw here today with Amsterdam, most of the has been mapped by approximation. So by starting off with a decent base map. So some gardens we've had discussions. One approach is to get a survey instead of buying these very expensive receivers. Maybe have a survey done on the sort of woody, long-lived material, and then you have those. You can use those as reference points when you map other things again. And if you have different maps to switch with, if you have a satellite map, you might even spot all the big specimens already. And then, so the key question I think for mapping is, if you're going to use the map for horticultural use only, then what kind of accuracy are you looking for? You want to find the plant. That's the key motivation. If you're going to use the map for more like making decisions on structural engineering, then you're in sort of in Greg Payton modus in terms of 7 centimeters accuracy. Yeah.
Plants are mapped. Older plants have less accurate position. So if I'm mapping new plants, I know all my newest plants are accurate. And sometimes I'll go back and remap those to make sure they're 6 inches back to the first week. But then when I put out planting flags for the new plants, and at that point I don't hook up the Trimble. I just sort of use, well, it's just like southwest of this one, and then near this one, sort of drop the tag right there temporarily. If they want this planted, if they hit a root, move it. I can go back and physically map it for this.
Cool. Yeah. Absolutely, 100%. So when we say works on anything, we mean anything with a reasonably modern browser. So like a 10-year-old Android might be difficult, but anything that's probably 5 years or less would without any difficulty. Yeah, that's the short answer. And we've tested on all kinds of things. So yeah, no, it's very. We haven't tested on the iPhone watch yet, but we might try that, or the Android version of that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks so much for joining, and yeah, get in touch if you have questions. you know you can find us on hortis.com or botanicalsoftware.com. And if you sign up to our blog, by the way, you get also notification when we have webinars. So we're going to have a follow-up webinar on the collection value scoring, where we will summarize the findings from yesterday, and also from the same. We had a similar presentation at the Eurogard Congress in Budapest in May. So yeah, that might be fun to join. And finally, we have T-shirts, and we don't want to pay excess luggage going home. So please take a T-shirt or two. There are small, medium, large, extra large. Okay, thank you.